thank you for being here. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Ryan Smith, and I work in corporate HR at Progressive and leadership development. And so it's been my pleasure to spend now about 9 months probably, first starting with BBU and then working with the folks at the ADAMHS Board, really preparing for today, preparing for these projects and the presentation. So thanks for being here. I don't want to take too much time, but I at least wanted to acknowledge and say thank you to the folks from the ADAMHS Board, and I know we've got some folks coming from BBU as well, because really to pull this off, it takes great partners to do, and so I really appreciate the time that folks spent with us and the opportunity to be here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our first team, and the first speaker is Jeff.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon. Appreciate the opportunity to meet with you all today and talk through one of the two wicked problems that were introduced to us a few weeks ago. We are a team of people from Progressive from across various functional areas, and over the last day and a half, we've been privileged enough to kind of look into a specific problem, a staffing problem that we will get into in great detail. From a high level, our presentation is going to be broken down to kind of calibrate on the problem itself. So making sure that we all understand what we are trying to affect and the approach that we took both in our research and in the solution that we're going to be presenting. We have three major categories of solution that we're going to deep dive into, and along with our recommendations, we're also going to talk through the change management, or how would you implement this from a near-term, medium-term, and long-term solution in these three categories. So first, the team. So sitting behind me, looking at my back somewhat awkwardly, is a group of 10 folks ranging from auto product managers, RV product managers, CRM, IT, claims, a broad perspective, marketing. That's why our deck looks so good. Thank you, Matt. A wide perspective of experience at Progressive, and I think we all took and dug into this challenge in different ways. So really fortunate to have a team that we've worked with over the past day and a half. So the problem, what is the problem itself? Providers are unable to attract and retain staff in key roles, including psychiatrists, case managers, and licensed social workers. Now, I'm assuming for all the folks sitting on this side of the room, that is not new news. But to us, just a few days ago, it was something that many of us were unaware of, and a new challenge for us to really dig into and try to understand how we could affect it. It's something that you can see in the news. So the opioid crisis is something that obviously is impacting all of our communities in a growing way, and really increasing the demand for behavioral health services. Simultaneously, we're seeing fewer people go into the field. So we're having this demand-supply gap form and get wider. And when we look at this, it's a very big problem. 1 in 5 people have a sort of a mental health condition. By 2025, a shortage of 250,000 workers will exist in the behavioral health professions. And approximately 111 million people live in mental health professions shortage areas where there's a need for additional help. So let's talk through our approach. 2 teams, 5 each, met in advance and talked through the problem and did some initial research. From there, we met with leaders within ADAMHS to try to understand some more context and get some of our initial questions answered. Then we broke out and did some initial brainstorming. When we came back together, we found these independent teams had a lot of the same ideas, but from different perspectives. And so we integrated those, and then came down with the 3 final recommendations that we'll share with you this afternoon. We then re-split into 3 teams to dive deep on those 3 recommendations and deliver the final deck that you see today and several appendix materials as well. Some of the research that we did, we had survey data from provider agencies from both ADAMHS and from the Woodruff Foundation. We also did some research on education, found 12 colleges in the immediate area that had applicable programs, found 8 volunteer organizations from the undergrad or high school level that we believe could contribute, actually positioned ourselves as new hires in the market and went to several job boards, looking at job descriptions, and trying to put ourselves into the frame of mind of someone trying to enter this industry. So our recommendation. And again, within each one of these 3 recommendation items, there will be immediate items that we recommend to use now. There's several bullet points around the near term over the next several years, and then finally some items for long-term strategic planning. So the 3 items. First, develop. We believe an essential foundation is tiered contracts for the provider agencies. Currently, there are minimal requirements for receiving payment, and that means that ADAMHS does not have an ability to affect change necessarily in these agencies. Tiered contracts aligns incentives between ADAMHS and those providers, and uses the single largest asset that ADAMHS has, its funding that it's providing to those agencies. Second, we believe that establishing relationships at a diverse source of talent makes ADAMHS position itself as a valuable platform to provide that talent to the agencies themselves. And finally, we believe ADAMHS is uniquely positioned to offer centralized services to these providers in mostly non-billable tasks, where we could then leverage the efficiencies today that are being operated independently among the provider network, and allow for more of that budget to be freed up for worker development and educational opportunities. So with that, I will hand it off to Hillary to talk through tiered contracts.
Hello, everybody. How are you doing today?
Hello.
Hey. Awesome. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about tiered contracts. One of the things we thought about when we were trying to determine what makes the most sense from a contract perspective is how do you leverage your biggest asset? And we really felt like that was funding. You're the providers of funds that these provider agencies need in order to run. So a big thing for us was really focusing on ensuring that we had, we put you in a position where you could use that asset that you had. And when we talk about tiered contracts, we took this idea from essentially what we do at Progressive. So we work with probably between all of our businesses, probably over 60,000 independent agents, body shops, vendors, tow vendors, salvage vendors, things like that. And one of the things that we do is we have a tiered structure to how we approach those relationships. So think about those that perform the highest, there's incentive for them. So whether that's getting a larger portion of the share of the work, or that's paying higher commissions, that's kind of how we look at and manage those relationships. So when we thought about tiered contracts specifically for you guys, we thought that the really big thing we need to focus on first is this is really a mindset shift for you. So this is going from you guys being a funder of care to really being a manager of care. And we thought that was important to point out because all of this work that we're talking about is really going to take an effort of shifting the mindset, not only of the people that work here at the ADAMHS Board, but also of the provider agencies that you work with. All right, so when we talked about developing the tiered contracts, kind of the goal for us was to establish a mechanism to leverage the funding that you guys have for creating an environment of accountability for your provider agencies. Like we talked about before, the challenge is shifting the mindset. So there is going to be a really big play around how you communicate this information to your provider agencies. This isn't something that you just walk out and say, here's a tiered contract, have fun. This is going to be something that's going to take some time. Some of the insight when we heard from you guys was really learning about how hard it is for you guys to get any data from the agencies that you fund. And so the most important part for us was to start off with an approach that gives you an end to get the data that you need to solve some of the wicked problems that we discussed, like your talent shortages. From a solution perspective, we're going to talk through 2 different solutions. The first solution is just a standardized contract that establishes a mechanism to collect data. The second solution for you who are long-term is to create a tiered contract approach once you have the data so you can start managing some of the performance of your provider agencies. So when we talk about the base model contract, this is really something we're thinking about for 2020. So when we're talking about that, we broke it up into 3 specific areas that we thought were really key for you to include in your contract. The first area was general data collection. So when we were talking about general data collection, what was really important for us was to understand, like, what's the data that you need? For those of you that aren't very familiar with Progressive, we measure everything, literally everything. So we are very astute to what's going on with our staff. We know how many people we have, we know how many people we need to hire, we know when we need to hire them by, and we know how much time it takes them to do any task at our company. That's one of the reasons that we're able to leverage that data and have a really robust staffing model for the 38,000+ people that we employ. When we talked about the general data for your contract, the things that we felt were really important to get was just the total, start with the total number of staff. So how many people do you have? How many people are in licensed positions? And also then how many people within the agencies do you have that actually have a license, so that we can capture those folks that maybe have a license but they're not currently working in a position for licensing. We also talked about understanding full and part-time positions. As we heard more from you guys, we learned that there are some folks that can work full-time, part-time, they can work at several agencies, so we thought that that was important. The other thing that's really key here is understanding the turnover rate. And so when we talk about turnover rate, we're not talking about, how many people left. That's part of it. But the bigger part of the equation is we also want to know how long were they at the company when they left. So that's key. And a couple of other things that we talked through were the positions that have been hired, and then understanding the percentage of funding that ADAMHS gives to each of the provider agencies, so you can understand like what percentage of the pie are you for that provider agency. That will help you make some decisions on how you can leverage your funding. We talked a little bit too about more in-depth detail on employees. So, things like finding out where are the new hires coming from. So if they're finding these ads on Google, that's great. If they're finding them through Indeed.com, also great. If they just happen to hear about it from a friend, those are things that you're going to want to know, especially because as we've heard from you guys, there's a lot of movement around agency to agency, so that'll give you the ability to track some of that stuff. We also thought it was key for you guys to understand the caseload per billable service employee. So I know there's a lot of different things you can bill for, but if you can kind of start to get a baseline for that, that will help inform some of your decisions. And then lastly, we thought that it was really key for you guys to require an exit survey for all of your provider agencies. We actually have a mock copy that we'll give you guys. We kind of took that off of something that we use. But you really want to understand, why do people leave? Is it compensation? Is it something else? Do they not like the people that they work with? Do they think there's no advancement for their career paths? What is it? So we built that. And then the last piece that we think that's key for the initial contract in 2020 is requiring some allocation to educational investment. So and the first part of this for us was really for you guys to establish, what does that funding allocation look like? We threw around things like it's 1%, it's 2%. That may not make sense. You guys are going to know better than us. But we certainly feel like it's important for you guys to require that a portion of the funds be set aside for attracting and retaining talent. Now, whether that's funding just the licensed job titles, or that is funding continuing education, whatever that looks like for you, we thought that those were keys, but you're really going to drive this agenda forward. One of the things that we will include for you guys is we put together, here it is, we put together a licensee report. So this is one of the things that we do at Progressive. We have a lot of positions that are licensed positions. They require continuing education, just like the positions that you guys have as well. And so we have included something there for you guys to help track that. Now today you may have provider agencies that do that, you may not, but we thought that it was good for you to at least have some type of structure or shell that you can share. Catching up? Okay. It's not catching up, perfect. So the next thing that we wanted to show you was just an example of an exit interview. So with an exit interview, we're really trying to establish, why did someone leave the company? We've actually built this out for you in an Excel form, so there's like pick list and things like that, so you can get standardized data. But the really important pieces here is we want to establish, what is it that made the person leave? And not only what is the main reason, but how do they feel about the other categories that really impact the company? So we have things like compensation. Did you dislike your current manager? Is it about the company culture? Is it about your opportunity for advancement? What does that look like? So we talked a little bit about some of the ways that some of the data that you can collect. We also wanted to talk about how you can use the data. So some of the things that we do with the data that I think would be really impactful for you would be to target how you recruit people. So for example, once you get the data, you can actually determine where you have a need. Is there a certain job title? Is it a certain area? Is it a certain agency? It will help also forecast what kind of staffing needs you might have in the future. So you talk about today you just have a shortage, right? You don't have a lot of data to know, is it a licensed social worker? Is it a counselor? Is it only in a specific area? Is it another area? These are things that you'll be able to track and then make some decisions moving forward to understand what you need. The other piece of this is performance improvement. So you can use this data for things like, we talked about some of the housing data, grievances, and things that the other team's going to talk about. But you can also use it to manage performance around staffing and other things that you deem are important or necessary. And then the last piece of it is targeted intervention. We talk a lot about turnover and how that impacts the company as a whole. At Progressive, it costs us on average about $10,000 when we lose an employee, right? So $10,000 is a lot of money. For you guys, it's probably very similar. You don't have that data today to know, but if you use hours as a baseline, that's a lot of money. On average, it takes about $2,000 to attract an employee. So when you think about that, the amount of times you're having to attract employees, the amount that you're losing, there's certainly a financial impact. And with turnover data, what's really important to understand is not only why they left, but where they were at in their job tenure. We have had several case studies at our own company where we've been able to target, we have a specific job title, it turns over at 8%, but we know 6 to 12 months, the turnover is 20%. So that's when you need things like additional intervention or maybe support to help people through the job. So kind of taking it to the next level, we thought that after you establish the base model contract, kind of 2021 and beyond, is really developing a tiered contract system. So we lined this out into 3 separate tiers. Now, I want to say when we made this, we based this solely on kind of what we were working on for attracting and retaining talent. You can absolutely include other measures in here that make sense for other areas you're trying to monitor or measure. So when we thought about this, just some high-level things, we thought if you're a tier 1 person, like you're doing everything we ask. You're giving us all the data we want. You're giving us the general data. You're giving us all your employee data. You've come up with a plan for what you're going to do as far as attracting and retaining talent. We thought tier 2, those are people that are a little less compliant. Those are folks that maybe are giving us some data. They're definitely spending the money on educational investment, but maybe they're not as structured. And we thought tier 3 folks could be people, maybe they're giving you data, and that's really all they're doing. So maybe they're not spending the money how you've asked them to, or ensuring that they have some type of impact on educational investment, but they're at least giving you data. And when we were outlining this, some of the benefits, we talked about, how do you incentivize people? And the real big thing with the tiering system is the folks that in tier 1, they kind of get it all. They get more funding. They get the highest level of funding. They're the folks that also could get access to the data that you are collecting. So if you have any trends that you are able to determine out of the data, you could share that back with them. We thought that it would also be really important for you guys to partner with somebody to have some type of recruitment kit. So if you could get somebody to put that together for you, that could be something that they get in return. Also a partnership with Twist Creative, they're very close to here, so they do a lot of the stuff I think for us and other companies, so there's things like that you might be able to do. We also thought that you could offer priority placement at any of your CEU classes and give them free access to it. So if you're doing all these things we asked you, you can come to our classes, we're going to help you with your CEUs, we're going to help with your training and certification. And then a couple of other things that we thought were important would also be access to the ADAMHS Board educational partners. So the next team will talk a little bit more about that, but we thought that that was really important. As you guys work to establish these partnerships in the community, whether it's with certain agencies or it's with colleges and universities, they can have access to that. And then lastly, we thought that it was important long-term for you guys to really figure out a way to align and centralize like administrative services. We thought that that could be a pretty big value add for you. And then also access to some type of employee assistance program. So we heard from some of the folks at the ADAMHS Board, that would have been really nice to have when they got to like that burnout phase. So if you could offer something like that to your top tier folks, that would be impactful. And then for tier 2 and tier 3, those are really just you get less. So the less compliant you are, the less you get, right? We thought this tiered approach would really help you guys leverage your funding, ensure that you have the right partners, and ensure that you're really moving kind of that entire community health system in the right direction. We do this, like I said, with a ton of agencies, shops, and things like that across the country. What I'll tell you is that the people that start off today in tier 3, they'll make a choice. They'll either work really hard to get to tier 2 or tier 1, or they'll self-select out. And it does improve the performance of your organization as a whole. So a couple other things we wanted to talk about here was just some of the metrics. So at Progressive, we measure everything. So not only do we like to collect data, we like to analyze it, and we like to know if we're doing a good job using it. So we thought we'd apply a similar approach here. Some of the things we thought would be important in the 2020 data collection is really just about compliance. Like how many people are giving you the data that you're asking them for. That's going to be really important. And then you're going to have an understanding from there, like how do you implement the tiered contracts, what's your data compliance, are you getting 5 metrics all the time, but the other ones you're not, maybe you need a better way to ask for it. It'll help inform some of those decisions. Improving educational investment, we thought that could be measured a couple ways, attendance, certification numbers, a survey, really asking about the value proposition for the companies that they work at, how many are offering, continuing education, CEU credits, and things like that. And then lastly, we thought that creating a high-performance climate, having a goal of that, reducing turnover, increasing job tenure and key roles was really key for you guys. So when you're doing all these things, you're putting into play a tiered program, a tiered contract. You want to ultimately increase your retention, reduce your turnover, ensure that employees have more manageable workloads and things like that. So those are some of the things that you can measure. All right, and with that, I am going to turn it over to Celia for sourcing talent.
I just have one slide, but I know I do. Okay, so we spent a lot of time with Carol, and we had the privilege of hanging with Levita, Carmen, Maggie, and Lindsay. And what they did is they really provided us with a better idea of what a purpose-driven career would look like. So before we dug into solutions, we wanted to step back and say, let's keep in mind what the why are we here, and come up with a persona of a purpose-driven worker. So this is what we came up with. Hopefully it rings true for you guys. I'm Sarah. My classmates voted me the biggest heart and most likely to adopt too many pets. I'm the one that stood between the bully and your friend, and the one who stayed with you that time that things fell apart. People tend to lean on me because I'm a good listener, and I'm happy to help people through and recover from tough times. I've got great people and moments in my life, which inspires me. This is more than my job or my career. This is my calling. This is my purpose. Hand it over to Phil.
Thank you, Celia. What I wanted to talk about was, our section was sourcing talent through relationships. And when we think about the challenge that Jeff outlined, was really about closing that gap of the increase in need for help and less people there available to meet that need. And we really think about sort of that funnel that you have around acquiring that talent, and how can we start that journey sooner and really resonate with people earlier in that career path decision-making process. A lot about what we heard is you might get that internship kind of late in your college career or late in your master's program, but how can we build that awareness sooner to find a way long-term to attract the millennials and really the Sarah personas to really want to help out. And so that's where we thought about, is the ADAMHS Board, can they be the central source, developing those relationships in the community to sort of help identify those people, connect with those people, and be that central place for that. So the first thing that we really thought would be important is bringing that Sarah persona to life. and think about building a social media strategy where you're having people tell their story. Whether that's a client that got services, whether that's somebody working at the ADAMHS Board, whether that's someone in the agency, how they feel fulfilled with helping people, how to really sort of bring that job to life, as well as sort of touch on those heartstrings. And the way we thought about how to sort of execute that is, could you reach out to corporations that have some of those videographers, and would they be willing to do that pro bono? Could you create an internship, or could you work with high school programs to sort of work on shooting that content? And then think about that social media strategy. You're going to have both a paid media strategy, but there's also a push strategy. And by paid, you're going to have to put a little dollars out there to reach the right audience. Can you use all those agencies? Can you use the ADAMHS, your friends, to sort of help push that message out and tell that story? The next thing we thought was important and what resonated with us was there was a slide there that showed the progression of a licensed professional and sort of how that pay scale worked with that. So you had some PDFs for both social workers and I believe on the counselor side. When we did some research, we thought that an opportunity was to kind of have a one-stop shop, an interactive tool to where you could bring that information together, help people then find scholarship opportunities, learn specifically what the job title, what would you be doing, connecting with those videos, maybe outlining them to colleges, what curriculums there were, so really to have people sort of work their way through to really understand kind of how would I progress in that career, what does that mean? We thought you could have an interactive site both on the ADAMHS Board, but maybe have a one-page pamphlet that could have a vanity URL that people could type in, where you could hand that pamphlet out at high schools, colleges, with guidance counselors to really sort of start getting that message across sooner to get people interested in that program. The last idea we kind of blew out in this PowerPoint presentation was around internships. Could you develop relationships with these local colleges and create an internship structure to where you get people helping in those agencies, helping the ADAMHS Board, and then if you work with it, you get guaranteed placement. So if you do a good job at an internship, it would turn into a job. Is there a way to maybe work with high school, bring the kids here, do some back office functions in an internship way to where they could learn a little bit more about what that work would be doing to where you sort of connect with them sooner through that program. And we looked at, there's a lot of colleges that offer curriculum along the counseling, social worker, behavioral health life cycle you might be able to engage with. But one of the important things we thought was important with that is really work with colleges that have a high placement for people in Cleveland. So I think someone gave the stat that it sounds great to work with Case Western is across the street, but 70% of the people are going to go get jobs elsewhere. Is that going to be efficient use of your time? It would be better to work with a Cleveland State or other local universities. The other thing we put together was, one more slide. We kind of put a matrix. We talked about sort of what we thought around effort and impact. And so the three ideas we thought of there, we thought might be a little bit less effort, it might have high impact. But we also had a few other ideas where we just kind of put in more of a one-line story there. But some things that we talked about were, is there an opportunity to create scholarships? Could you take some of your funding and either do a scholarship with some of your tier 1 agencies as a way to encourage retention of those agencies that could be for their children or education? Could you maybe even create some scholarships to do a pilot where maybe you work with some local high schools and you have a scholarship that ADAMHS sponsors as a way to get people to click on that clickable career progression content, learn more about ADAMHS as a way to sort of to just get more eyeballs on your solution. We also thought about, could you work with sort of service organizations? So whether that's Key Close, whether that's Project Heal, or the Alpha Phi Omega. So kind of working closer with those volunteer service organizations as a way to source some of that future talent. And then Hillary touched a lot about data, and really just everything that you're doing is just measuring that sort of that funnel, right? How many people are viewing those social media? How many people maybe hit the Vandy URL and saw the career progression site? How many people applied for an internship? How many of those interns became full-time future employees? So really just kind of measuring the effectiveness of everything that you're doing. Now I'm going to turn it over to Art.
Let's go. So when we think about all those challenges and the challenge of hiring and competing for the same pool of talent, one of the biggest, I guess, barriers in bridging that challenge is the fact that all those organizations are independent of each other and they don't work together. So a lot of the ideas that were discussed until now and some ideas that I'm going to mention now don't really work on a small scale. Can those agencies, providers, can they benefit from working together just like it works with regular humans, right? If you go to hunt alone, you're going to maybe catch a rabbit. If you go with a bunch of people, you might get a deer or something. Can that work at the organizational level? We think it can, and we think ADAMHS can have a role in facilitating that collaboration. All right. Those benefits can come in both directly and indirectly. So if ADAMHS took a role in facilitating collaboration, you could work on things like, what if we took things that are non-billing activities off the hands of the caregivers, right? What if they did not have to punch in all the billing information? What if we can do that for them? Let them utilize, instead of 55% of their time for billing, make that 60%. Would that be a huge benefit? Is that something that ADAMHS can help with? We think you can. Those are direct benefits. There can also be indirect benefits. So, for example, what if we had ADAMHS facilitated an EAP program that is on a large scale, right? If you're running a 20-employee organization, having an EAP, employee assistance program for 20 people is kind of hard. But when you're talking about 3, 4, 5,000 employees, now we can talk about something that's continuous, that's organized, that's consistent, that's available at all times. And if you have that, then you can have an impact on retention of employees, on help with burnout, etc. So you can really have an indirect impact, but a very, very meaningful one nonetheless. We broke down, we sort of like separated, we brainstormed a lot of ideas for things that where centralization can help agencies and providers. And we've separated them into 3 types of benefits or activities. One is knowledge sharing. There's a lot of knowledge, a lot of agencies do essentially the same things, but they all do it differently. And I'm willing to bet not everyone is doing everything very, very effectively, right? Some are going to do it better than others. What if they help each other out? Economies of scale. Some things, just size matters directly, right? If you're buying office supplies for a small office, you're going to Office Max and you're paying retail. And if you're buying something for 20 offices or 60 offices, you're paying half, maybe even less than that. It's going to require some facilitating, right? It's going to require some logistics that can be done, and it can be more than offset by the savings of the direct cost of the goods. And then it could also be things that benefit the caregivers directly. One of the ideas we discussed was healthcare benefits. Right? If you're buying healthcare benefits, I think we looked it up. If you're a small employer, you're paying 10 to 18% more for the same benefits. Right? So if you pull everyone together, and now you're suddenly buying health benefits as a large employer, you're paying less for the same benefits, or you're giving better benefits, and now you're in a much, much better position to compete with the clinic down the road on the same talent. And then lastly, we think there could be value in having a sense of shared purpose. All these people who do an incredible work, very, very difficult work, don't get a lot of money for it. They do it for a reason, right? You guys do it for a cause. What if we collected data and we could tell you, hey, maybe you worked with, I don't know, 50 people this year, but the organization, this umbrella of ADAMHS organization that you're part of, you guys helped 5,000 people this year, or I'm sure the number is a lot larger. You've saved 700 lives. You know, things like that that sort of like increase the sense of accomplishment, of purpose, and the sense of a common goal. Within the team, we brainstormed. I think we currently have 16 items, opportunities for centralization opportunities. I'm sure if you guys sat through those sessions, we probably have 116. So by all means, add to the list. We broke it out into three, I guess 3 by 3. So we separated it by the types of benefits that I just discussed. And then we sort of like have initial recommendations to what agencies could benefit from those services. And that is going to be based off the contract tiers. So if you're willing to play nice, you can get more. Right? Phil talked about a partnership with a college or a bunch of schools. What if he created a program for scholarships for students? Well, only the Tier 1 agencies can benefit from those scholarships. So only somebody who is going to do an internship in that agency can benefit from that scholarship. And if you're Tier 3, that's great, but you cannot benefit from that scholarship program. We talked about healthcare benefits. We talked about licensing. Can ADAMHS take an active part in helping agencies keep track of licensing, when the renewal times are up, what kind of training needs to be provided? They only do it sometimes, in some cases, can that be broadened to a larger scale? I'm not going to read through the entire thing. Is there an opportunity to maybe partner with a corporate and have an annual event where you just recognize everybody's hard work, say thank you, have them meet each other, and again, increase that sense of common goal. You can do that with recruiting. If you're a 50 employee organization and you're trying to go to a college and recruit, it's really hard to get a spot in that recruiting event because you're looking to hire 1 or 2 people. If you're going as a 3,000 people organization and you're now hiring 50 or 100 people, that college is a lot more likely to give you a tent in their networking event or whatever it is. So there is a lot of opportunity for working together, even though those organizations can often compete for the same resources. I don't know if they're friends or not, but it doesn't even matter. There's one principle that must be followed up, and it's the what's in it for me principle, right? We want them to play with this. It has to be beneficial for the agency. It's not enough that we all know there's benefit in them working together. They need to see that benefit. We think that there are some opportunities here. I'm not sure all practical, but you guys will be able to figure it out. And there's a blown-out version of that scatter plot in the appendix with a list of items, number of items. And with that, I think Jeff will take us home.
So, in closing, this is the most important slide of the presentation. So if you haven't listened to this point, hello, I'm Jeff. 3 recommendations. So Hillary talked to you about really the foundation of our strategy, tiered contracts, to align incentives of ADAMHS and the providers that work within what we're referring to as the ADAMHS network. Then Phil came and talked through how can we find more diverse sources of this scarce talent. So we recognize that internships are one of the critical paths, but what can we do to broaden and deepen the internship program while simultaneously trying to move upstream and try to reach out to that purpose-driven worker in undergrad and in high school to move them towards behavioral health and their career path design. And finally, Ariel talked through centralized services. And admittedly, this is the hardest part of our plan and the longest term section of the strategy. But how can ADAMHS position themselves to be a provider of non-billed central services to help the efficiency of the entire ecosystem, such that we believe more of those fund dollars could be used with increased efficiency to help acquire and retain those skilled workers at each one of the providers within the ADAMHS network. The beautiful part about all of this is I can tell you it works. We have done basically these 3 tactics with our own business with about 60,000 providers through independent agents and our claims ecosystem with body shops, tow providers, etc. We have tiered contracts in order to make sure that those providers who are willing to contribute the most value to Progressive are given the most value in return. Likewise, we recognize that it's difficult to hire several of the jobs within our organization. Just yesterday, we met with the head recruiting manager within Progressive, and we've identified a handful of jobs that we believe are mission critical to meeting the needs of our customer. And we have made investments to try to find reliable and sustainable sources for those jobs, which is very similar to the programs that we're recommending in finding diverse and new sources upstream earlier. We actually just introduced a STEM program in middle schools. That's an insurance-based board game. If you want more information, please follow up. We're happy to talk to you about it. And finally, centralizing what we can to deliver value and efficiency. So in our experience, centralizing things like marketing for some of our independent agents who may not have the funds to go out and make their own webpage or work in search engine optimization. Allowing for those resources to be shared with the people that are our partners in the network contributes to everyone. It helps us, it helps our partners, and we believe the exact same efficiencies can be realized by ADAMHS. So with that, thank you very much, and we have about 15 minutes for questions. No questions? If you have no questions, I'm going to force one of you to go through an auto insurance quote. So.
I just have a comment. The social media testimonials is actually in our strategy for this year.
Awesome.
The focus, though, was to increase knowledge about what the ADAMHS Board, not for recruiting purposes, but there's absolutely no reason that that cannot be tweaked. So I wouldn't have thought of aligning those, but then it fits right in because it's something we're already working on. Thank you.
Well, we met with some of the folks working with ADAMHS yesterday. Really, the persona of that purpose-driven worker came through. And it comes down to relationships, it's empathy. What better way to do that than video? And we feel like the more that we can document that and share that with others outside of behavioral health, we think it will definitely draw attention and interest. Yes, ma'am.
I have a comment, not a question. I think it's interesting suggesting to explore relationships with high school students because my daughter just entered high school this year, and I started thinking about that. In their sophomore year, they have a health careers sciences track where if they're interested in health careers, they can participate in their sophomore year. If they want to be a nurse, they go to hospitals, they follow the nurses. I mean, they've got kids observing, surgeries, and they have an engineering track, but you don't hear about behavioral health, social work, I don't know if it's because it's not lucrative, you say, I want to be a nurse, great, I want to be a doctor, great, social worker, so I think to explore that, because you don't, I'm just talking from my perspective, I don't know what other high schools do, but, I think that would be a good way to go.
And I think there are those people out there that, again, are that purpose-driven individual that are looking for that opportunity. We focused on kind of like the Key Club and the volunteer organizations, but I think your point is exactly right. Why not find that person that's called to give back in their community through healthcare and try to tap into that at the earliest possible age? Now, in our conversations with Carol, she was very clear that we need to be a little careful on some of the client-facing things, especially with those that may be under 18. And that's where I think ADAMHS, with the expertise that you have, could find creative solutions to try to, if we have someone who's interested, how can we try to get that hook as early as possible while allowing them to kind of explore the opportunities that are available. And we think that being central to the industry and having access to all of these providers really allows ADAMHS to be a powerful ally for both the students and the providers to make those matches and try to hopefully move that upstream. So I think a great opportunity, frankly. I should say we, wasn't my idea. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question that I don't think you have the answer to, but I'm.
Probably not. I'm an insurance guy, so.
When you all talk about centralizing non-billable services, kind of administrative services and oversight, I'm thinking that requires an investment in ADAMHS staff and maybe even more hires. Do you think about that, and so what are your thoughts?
Yeah, we agree. We think longer term, that is the natural progression, and something that we have gone through, actually, one of the folks that I think you're going to hear from in the next group, and manages a team of what we call an in-house agency, where we've taken some of the skills and the jobs that have been out in the field, and we brought those inside because we found that there were some opportunities there. So it is absolutely something that would be headcount positive, but we believe with buy-in from the right providers that there are efficiencies of centralizing those efforts. So I think about a smaller provider that may not need the second accountant, they may need 1.5 accountants. Well, it's suboptimal to then have them hire two and have some excess capacity there, whereas if you have providers all using this pool of individuals, you'd be able to better leverage that. And hopefully, the whole idea here is to pass those efficiencies back to the providers so they can invest in employee development. So how can you make the most out of that dollar that they're receiving in order to make it flow through to the skilled workers?
Would the providers pay something for that service? Like, would you guys see that as something because the ADAMHS Board would provide that to all of them, that based on how much they use it, or something that they're paying?
Probably yes. I mean, I don't know what exactly is the channel to do that. Is it part of a single year to just, when you stand up the system, to allocate part of that specific year's budget to stand up the system? And then maybe ADAMHS hires more of its own personnel on the account of an additional account. So yes, I mean, there would be, we need to figure that piece out. But yes, it would come out of essentially the same pool of money.
And I think it's important to think about when you're going to centralize services like that, you first have to understand the work. So you have to go through the exercise of really delineating, what is true admin work and what is work that has to be handled by a licensed professional. And then from there, how much time does it take to do each of those tasks? So you can make an informed decision about how many people do you really need. So doing time studies to understand, like on the low end, on the high end, and the middle, what's the average time it takes to enter a bill. There's a lot of things you can do there, so you really understand what that staff is. And depending on what it is, you might be able to use a volunteer program or an internship to accomplish some of that work. But you got to understand the work first.
But we think
More data.
The internship program today is largely focused on the health providers, but there's opportunities here where we're touching on like an accounting opportunity, but why not reach out to accounting programs and try to bring in an intern for some of that work? I think that's where we can get very creative to kind of broaden that internship, and I think it plays into the other strategies that we talked through. Other questions? These are great. Oh, and I just killed it, didn't I? No, we're right on time. Look at that.